So, Matt, I wanted to have you on. We had some good conversation in church about head coverings and for particularly for women in the church, and if that is still for today, because I had never even given that really a second thought, other than some of our brothers and sisters in maybe very conservative churches like Mennonite or Apostolic Christian or one of those denominations. But when we had started talking, I think one thing that really interested me was I like history, and you were talking about how historically it has been the precedent that women would wear head coverings all the way up until probably the 1960s in church. And so that really got me interested in, well, what was the biblical precedent then, that did something change today, that if this is a cultural thing, then why did we do it 50 years ago and we don't do it today? So just to start off with, you got any thoughts there on what would have changed from then to today that would bring, this, that pretty much no one does it today except for very, conservative traditional denominations, and even some of them I know are kind of going by the
Right.
wayside. Even the past, I don't know, decade, they kind of
Yeah.
tossed that.
Yeah. It was actually one thing as a note for us Presbyterians is the OPC, they have an
Mm,
official, if you go, Google head coverings OPC, they have a statement and they would say that it is a cultural argument, and we would not say that the OPC is not a conservative church. So yeah,
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
so we do see that, and
But
uh,
I think we had talked about even within Presbyterianism, it was uh, all
yeah,
Presbyterians would wear head
yeah,
coverings up until
yeah,
what, the 50s, or
yeah,
was it?
and I need to do some research into kind of the lineage here, because I think part of the Reformation is trying to bring out the light of history, what was good, and
Mm,
where there was corruption or error. And I mean, we do see a consistent lineage of
mm,
the testimony of, and I was saying that even like the catacombs, some of the art and drawings that are being discovered right now, they show women being covered, and then really
oh.
kind of a straight line. With Irenaeus, Tertullian, Clement of Alexandra, John
Mm,
Chrysostom, Jerome, Augustine, and then really getting to the Reformation, John Knox, John Calvin. I don't fully know, but I know Luther's at least made some comments that are pro. Um,
mm,
George Gillespie, Matthew Henry, Thomas Schreiner, who is a contemporary for us, and then
okay.
R.C. Sproul. He actually had a kind of a video towards the end of his life. You can see him on a ventilator if you look up the video.
Uh-huh.
But he affirmed that he doesn't think the cultural argument really um,
Holds
uh,
weight.
holds weight to
Wow.
the clarity of what he thinks the text is presenting, because his point was, if there's no argument, then we can speculate. And I think that is something of an
Wow.
encouragement, is, in the modern era, there has been some positives. I mean, we've had a better ability to recover some of the historical context. Um, there has been a renaissance. I mean, even just the studying of
Mm,
Greek and Hebrew, but I mean, even like archaeology and related things of really trying to recover the context. So I could appreciate the effort in the modern era, and I think a lot
mm.
of the shift could be in a good faith way, that we've recovered something that was lost in the context that we think is our key to the text. And so
So,
there are people that do hold that. And then I guess the final
huh.
person to mention of note who wrote something this year was Kevin DeYoung too,
Yeah,
on head
Kevin
coverings.
DeYoung. So that's a great point. So from the early church all the way up to people that we probably, a lot of us know and respect, like all the way to R.C. Sproul, to the reformers and all that, there is this precedent that this isn't just cultural, that this this could be, head coverings could be something that should still be done today from a lot of these very respected theologians and Bible teachers.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's really interesting to me. Like I don't hear this discussed anywhere really.
Nope. Yeah, I mean, you have to kind of be in the right spaces, and I can't quite. I did learn a lot about. I'd say a lot of this has been kind of nurtured through the internet, through some of the groups that I follow.
Okay.
And I can't quite. I don't know if I could quite define how to encompass them. But yeah, there is, and I actually discovered while I was preparing for this that there's actually like maybe a face or a front to this group, and it's called the Head Coverings Movement. They have a website.
Oh, I saw that
Head
you
Coverings
sent me.
Movement. Yeah,
And that was that started by R.C. Sproul?
I don't
I was
think
reading
so.
on it. It's okay.
Yeah, I don't quite know who's behind it, but I do. Some of the people that I follow also follow this page. So
Okay.
I do. There's something there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was reading some of their arguments, and it was insightful. It would be way too much
So
depth to unpack here, but
we'll go into real quick. What's one of the top two compelling arguments for why a woman would still want to do this today, to be true to the scripture? Then
yeah, so I think beyond like kind of a historical analysis, yeah, we do see a consistency and really a departure, really only of late. If we were to think of kind of a normal practice, what we're doing today would be not normal. It doesn't mean it's wrong, but it's not normal.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I was thinking even back to, I had conversations with some of my family this week while I was preparing for this, and just that they grew up in this transition. So this happened in their lifetime.
Okay.
Yeah, and sorry, before I jump into it too, another point is that we still see some of it today. I mean, we still see some concept of this in a wedding veil, and that there is some, and in that context, you can see that median is preserved. I mean, what is a woman doing when she veils her head? She's showing that her husband is the head. So we do see some of that meaning preserved. Now, does every person who participates understand that? No, but that's where this comes from.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, the exegetical arguments. One of the comments when you're reading the passages, you've heard hair is a covering.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that's a solution to the text. So, because in verse 5, but every woman who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head. It is the same as if her head was shaved. So clearly her head's not shaved. She has, and then in verse 6, for if a woman does not cover her head, she might as well have her hair cut off. So clearly she doesn't have her hair cut off, right? She might as well have had it. So he's making some sort of related point. He's saying in the same way that, as he goes on to say later, that the glory of a woman is her hair, very similarly, it should be covered. Yeah, and then so in verse 6, but if it is a disgrace for a woman to have her hair cut off or her head shaved, then she should cover her head. So
which kind of goes against like having hair as a covering then. Like,
I know there are, like all things, I'm sure there are serious people out there who would give a defense of the hair view. I don't see it when I read it. I haven't really heard a compelling argument from what I've researched. Someone can obviously challenge me on that if they have a compelling point. I guess I'm not exposed to that yet. I think another argument is like we think of a similar context. There's a few related passages here. First off, we have 1 Timothy 2, where we get into submission of women in worship and teaching. And similarly, we have like an example of greet your brother with a holy kiss. I've heard that one preached before. And the argument for why we don't do greet your brother with a holy kiss is because it's really not grounded in anything deeper. And this is R.C. Sproul's point. He said, if it was the holy kiss argument, right?
Mhm.
We're really kind of left with a mandate without really a deeper reason. Then sure, we can speculate about the context. And, the cultural argument will say, oh, that we know that women who were prostitutes in that day had a shaved head. And so we can, kind of use that as our primary support to say that that's the context which Paul's taking. Therefore, we view this text in light of that. I obviously don't think that goes far enough.
Wow. So prostitutes in that day had a shaved head?
Yeah, that's yeah, you can look
Wow.
into that, but that's one of the
Okay.
main arguments I've heard. But the other thing is, so then it's not like that. I mean, in this passage we have references to creation and we have references to marriage. And
Yeah.
one of the debates is kind of how we unpack the relationship of those two. Some people would say that a head covering is just for married women. And then similarly, some people would say the creational argument shows that it's for all women.
Mm.
And some of the arguments you can
Now, is
unpack.
that because the woman unmarried would still be under the headship of her father
Yeah,
and
some of
showing that?
those deeper reasonings, I don't know. Yeah, I'm sure we could formulate something like that. I'm not confident in that. But one example is that the head of every man is Christ. It doesn't say the head of every married man is Christ. And so somehow this applies to all men, but doesn't apply to all women.
Mm.
It only
Yeah.
applies to married women. So it's some of those things. There's a few moments in there where you're kind of like, okay, well, it kind of feels like he's talking both ways. He's talking to married people, and then he's also talking to the whole sex.
Mm.
And so whatever, I'm not here to resolve that, but the point is that there is a creational grounding here. Now, some people kind of synthesize both. You can, again, in good faith, maybe that's there. Obviously, there could be motives to want to synthesize both. We always feel pressure to take the best of both worlds, so to speak. And so it's hard to not read that synthesis into it. But because, well, a point that I want to make sure I get to is that even though this may feel like a minor point, a minor argument, the problem is that it's so visible.
Mm.
And so anyway,
Like
yeah, so
if you divide over it, you're gonna know who's on one side, and you're gonna
right. So
know who's on the other.
it'd be easier if we could just keep it as like an issue that, I don't know, you might know people
But
feel this way or that way, but at the end of the day,
like
who
something that's not
cares?
visible, like I'm a Calvinist, you're an Arminian, but
Yeah.
like nobody knows the difference until we really start
Well, I
getting into
actually wrote that
discussion.
down as an example. I said there's a lot of
Yeah.
theology that, in a sense, can be kind of, well, not to use the head covering example, but can be clothed, can be kind of hidden. And
Yeah.
and so yeah, really, you can't go to a church that does head coverings and not cover your head. And one of the reasons that I'm reading too is that one reason that some women who are conscious of this controversy don't cover their head is that because they go to a church where the vast majority doesn't cover their head, and that puts a certain pressure on them
Oh,
to well, what kind of message am I sending?
yeah.
Even if I am convicted about it, I don't want to, you know, step on any toes, make anyone feel uncomfortable, or send the message of self-righteousness or legalism.
So
So these
with
aren't light
you
matters, and some sort of a unified consensus, does
with
kind of
you
help.
saying that though, I wonder in these churches, like if this is the precedent to cover your head. I just wonder like how many of these women in the congregation are genuinely in submission to their husband there. Like I think that would be an interesting study to do. Like does it just become a cultural thing in the church, or are they actually like in submission to their husbands?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, and there can be some sort of scandal. I mean, if there's one thing that I could think of, part of the disconnection obviously would be what happened in 1960 is the rise of women ordination, the rise of feminism, women's suffrage.
Yeah.
We can see a lot of reasons why this symbol was dropped for reasons that because of the media, not for the lack thereof. And I think that's another one of the compelling arguments is we say it doesn't have meaning anymore. Well, it did, and actually, the moment where it quote unquote, lost its meaning was actually probably at the height of its meaning, because I think people knew exactly what it meant.
Yeah.
It's not very feminist. Cover your head. Where the symbol is of submission to your husband, or
Yeah.
of respect to your husband.
Hmm.
So
That makes sense. Well, and then like on the flip side of that, we have traditions for men as far as like hats off in the
yep.
building, hats off during prayer, like those that nobody really probably consciously thinks about. Why am I taking my hat off again to pray or to go into the church or to go into a building? It seems like hats off in the building kind of has went out the window, but maybe in a church more so than just any building.
Yeah, I remember bringing this up with some friends where we were kind of talking through this. I actually brought it up with my family as well. I said, "Do you think that a man should take off his hat when they pray?" And they affirmed, "Oh, yeah, it's a matter of respect." And I said, "Well, that's the same language of this passage is, honor, dishonor, shame, glory, respect, and beyond. That's actually like a whole other thing too on how we interpret this, but." We seem to kind of keep that around. That still has meaning, yet the head covering doesn't. And I think that's just another point to say, do we really understand that they're connected? They're two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. And like where it seems like we kind of lost something in that tradition there.
Yeah. Yeah, and so it's hard not to read into the social acceptability of we can keep the men doing whatever they want to do, but as long as the women are free, then. Yeah. So I mean, these are correlations, and then there's a whole thing with the Vatican, and I mean, the Vatican has a history of this being a consistent practice, and in 1917 that was formalized. And it may have been before that. I'm not an expert. Yeah, in 1917, and then somehow I'm again some of the facts I'm a little blurry on, but somewhere along the way. So from 1917, you had to wear a veil in church, and then somewhere in the 60s, something happened. I don't quite know how, but it kind of was optional in some sense. And then in the 80s, 1983, I think, related to Vatican II, it was some old things were reinstated, but not the veil. So the veil was fully removed from the practice. And now I know Catholics, and they would still say that we think it's tasteful. They still think it has meaning, and women are free to wear one. But I think we run into the same problem where. But women don't.
So before 1980, like Catholic women going to mass would cover their head.
Yeah, and I don't quite know where the departure was. Again, a lot changed in the 60s. In the 80s, it was really kind of stamped out through the law. But in the 60s, I think Catholic women had already began to stop wearing a veil.
Okay.
Now, that event, I'm a little fuzzy on.
Well, certainly the nuns cover their heads, I guess. So
yeah, they still do. Yep. I think they do.
Yeah, they do. They have the real long.
To your point with that, though, I think that gets in some of the scandal is that we take these things that, to me, speak of chastity and modesty, and we still have movies that are profane that. The Catholic nun is still kind of a sexual image. It's normally altered and kind of disgraced in Hollywood and mainstream media, and I think we know why. I think it's that image of purity. I think we still know what it means. It's just this picture of purity and submission, and we trample on it. So I don't think the meaning's been lost.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Well, we got to wrap it up here, but so this is a good question for the post millennial men out there. How do you think if we could, if embracing this would do us good, how would this help us further the millennial kingdom? as we wait for Christ's return here? What do you think? Any thoughts
Yeah, I
there?
don't know, on the spot here. Yeah, Matt's still converting me to Post Mill. I don't know. I kind of float around. I see a lot of the, but yeah, from a post millennial perspective, yeah, I think it's definitely a push against this androgynous age, where men and women are the same, and I think at least in some sense,
That's a good point.
We're ushering in the glory of the sexes, a return to that. I think that would be a pretty optimistic thing to return to, as
rooting ourselves in nature again instead of this crazy clown show that we have going on right now. That's a good point. I like that. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Matt, for that. Let me